order out of executive session. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, are there any amendments to the agenda?
I have one. Mr. Chair, the 605 item, the application for change of manager, has been withdrawn by the applicant, so I'd like to remove that from the meeting agenda.
Okay. Any other changes, amendments? Okay, I'll take a
I'll
motion.
have one thing under new business.
Okay. All right. All right, now I'll take a motion to,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Seconded.
all those in favor?
Aye.
The chair says aye. It's approved. Any announcements this evening? I don't have any.
I don't have any, no.
Okay. Anybody here or online for public input?
If they could use the raise your hand.
And please raise your hand, and I'll see it over there, or just you'll see it. Okay. No.
You can't see it over there. It's only over here.
I don't know. I'd have to get Max.
Okay. As
I'll
long
just
as
look this
you're-
way.
All right, not seeing anybody. We'll go ahead on to the next item on the agenda, which is a public hearing for a poll petition on Bishop Road.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Town of Ayer, notice of public hearing, Ayer Select Board. The Ayer Select Board will be conducting an in-person and remote participation public hearing on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 at 6 p.m. regarding a petition by National Grid and Verizon New England to locate poles, wires, and fixtures, including the necessary sustaining and protecting fixture along and across the following public way. Plan number 308938890. Bishop Road, National Grid to install one JO pole on Bishop Road beginning at a point approximately 241 feet west of the center line of the intersection of Bishop Road and Park Street. Installing new mid-span riser pole approximately 38 feet east of existing P2-50, Bishop Road, Ayer, Mass.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Do we have anybody here from?
Anybody online from National Grid?
No one's online from National Grid. But this was, Mr. Chair, sent to the DPW engineering and, sorry, I'm blanking, the town planner, and there's no issues with it. So
Okay.
we're actually gonna see another full petition in the coming weeks, the continuation of this project.
Of this one, okay.
Yeah, so just FYI.
Any questions?
I
from
have
the
none.
audience
I have none.
or online? All right, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the poll petition as submitted.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. It's approved. Yep.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yes. All right, moving along. Our next item up is going to be the Department of Public Works report from Dan and Shelwick. Dan? Good evening.
Good evening. All right, 4 items tonight for DPW. The first is the contract for the Clearwell Storage Tank Project over at Grove Pond Water Treatment Plant. So currently, the project, we opened the bids on January 15th. The low bidder is RH White with a low bid price of $4,362,000. We reviewed the bids and they are positive, good reference checks, et cetera. So moving forward with RH White is recommended. One thing right now is that we're working with the Army to get the funds into place for the project. I'm told, and I've been in touch with the Army, that they've moved them into place, but they're putting together the agreement between the town and the Army for the funds, similar to the Grove Pond PFAS treatment, the original work that was done. So technically, the funds aren't totally allocated right now, but in the interest of time on a project like this, and working with Robert, we talked about having the board vote tonight to allow the town manager to execute the contract for the amount I mentioned, once the Army has, we've signed the agreement with the Army, just so we can move along right away. I'd expect the Army agreement hopefully this week to be completed.
Questions?
And we're still thinking it's gonna be spring for the
It,
timeline?
the aim is to, by the end of June, to have it in place. That's the goal, and we're striving toward it, so. There's always, construction, but that's what,
I know it well.
that's the schedule, yeah.
Any other questions?
I have none.
Then I would like to make a motion, vote to execute the contract with Grove Pond Water Treatment Facility, PFAS system improvements in the amount of $4,362,000 for signature by the board.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Does the motion need to allow Robert to?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, could we just, would the board consider amending the motion to just authorize the town manager to sign once the Army agreement is in place?
Yes.
We could do just a second motion.
Second motion.
Oh,
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
easier, yeah.
So we'll
Oh,
do
yeah.
the first motion?
Yep, the first, yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. And then the second motion would be,
I make a motion that the town manager be authorized to sign the contract
Once
once
the Army
oh,
agreement is in place.
once the Army agreement is in place.
Seconded.
perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
And chair says aye.
Okay, great. Number 2, execution of the contract for the Spectacle Pond Water Treatment Plant, sodium hypochlorite chemical skid replacement. So this was brought up at a previous board meeting, and the board did vote to authorize UDAG funds toward this project. So everything's in place, contracts here, so once we sign it, we can get moving. I don't know if there's any questions. In the memo, it does have the amount of the contract.
Heard it last time.
I'll make a motion that the board vote to execute the contract for the Spectacle Pond Waste Treatment Plant Sodium Hydrochloride Chemical Skid Replacement in the amount of $136,438 for signature by the chair.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. It's approved.
Okay, item number 3 is a change order for the wastewater valve installations at Main and Central Ave pump stations, our 2 major stations. In order to complete the work, we discovered that we have a valve that's on the force main between the treatment plant and the pump station, and that valve no longer works. So we had to replace that valve with a line stop, we call it. And as part of that, we're able to fund it through existing project funds and some of our pump station improvement funds. So we recommend the approval of this change order for the project for $49,720.
Questions?
Then I'd like to make a motion to recommend the approval of the change order number 1 for the wastewater valve installation at Main and Central Pump Station project, which includes an increase of $49,720 in the contract price for signature by the chair.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye.
Okay, last item from, it was in January where we updated the board on the issue at our Spectacle Pond Well 1B. On January 7th, that well went down, and it's our largest producing well in town. So since then, we've been working to repair it. We ordered parts while the well was offline. We also did a cleaning and redevelopment to get the well back into good quality working order. And that's a routine maintenance item we've really deferred, excuse me, because we need the well in service. So that was a positive out of it. And the redevelopment did increase the capacity of the well. It wasn't drawing down as hard. So as of writing this memo, last Friday, we did get all the parts replaced and repaired, and the well is back up and running online as of last Friday. I'm working with Kimberly to get together a total cost, but the well pump and motor installation, we had the well development done, as well as Devon's support. They were giving us emergency supply to help keep us afloat while we were in this situation. So we'll get that together, but just wanted to give an update that it's back up and running.
Great, thank you.
And that's it.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Mr.
much.
Chair,
Have a
everybody.
good night. Next up is the creation of the Air Sustainability Committee.
Mr. Chair, I just ask the conservation agent to come on up to the table.
Good evening.
Hello.
Frame it for you.
I guess so. I apologize. This is my first time ever before you guys, in case you don't know, Heather Hampson, the conservation agent. So I just want to thank Robert, for this, first of all. It's something I gave to him as an idea, I think back in July, to the creation of a sustainability committee, and I want to thank him for bringing this forward to you guys as a, hopefully to get it created, and you go forward for approval of it today. Do you want me to go through the idea of it? Did you have any questions? I just don't.
If you want to go through the idea, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
at least for the public.
Yeah, so the thought is to have up to a 9-member creation of a sustainability committee with several members of the existing town departments on there, myself being in charge of the committee, the town planner, the facilities director, a representative from the DPW, whether it be the town engineer or Dan, the director himself, along with hopefully a representative of the school, and then about 3 members of the public. The charge of the committee will basically be looking at what's existing in the town's existing MVP plan, along with potentially updating that to the new 2.0 MVP program, along with looking at other items that were listed within the master plan, the MVP plan, and the hazard mitigation plan. Within the MVP plan, there is, and one of the top priority items is development of a community engagement and outreach program, which that would most likely fall under this, so we could look at updating that and creating and actually following through with some of our items listed in our major plans in the town.
Good job.
Yeah.
There's a whole history too of why we're doing this, but I don't think you need to go through all that if you need me to, as far as the state's programs that they have.
The recycling committee, is that
Yes.
still?
Yeah, and I don't want to, so the thought of this too, and it's all up to how this committee goes, but the idea of this is there is several old committees in town. One is still listed on the town's website, which is the recycling committee. There's older ones, ponds and dams, greenway committee, that have more or less fallen off the wayside. The hope on this is to actually revamp those and have them all fall under this committee itself. The only one that's on the website right now is the recycling committee, so nothing I think can be done on that until we figure out what the charge of this committee will be, and then we can move forward on that. And looking what other towns have done with their sustainability and climate change committees, a lot of the work is being done on the transfer station and increasing recycling and reducing the town's cost on that side. So hopefully this is something that we can take under this committee and basically just take over the existing recycling committee, and maybe a member or two of that would want to come over on this one.
I like it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, plus, it's a good idea to kind of revamp some of the old committees.
Some of the old, yeah, and it falls in line with the state's resilient mass plan that was published in 2023, and they have the climate assessment from 2022 that spells out some of the high impacts for the central region and costs of the towns.
Any other questions?
I don't. I think this sounds like it'd be a good idea.
I agree.
All right, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion that the select board approve the creation of an air sustainability committee as presented.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Okay, Thank you.
Thank
Heather.
you.
Thank you.
Come again, don't be a stranger.
Okay, she'll be back.
All right, next up is going to be the town manager's report.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good evening. You have in your packet the warrants that were reviewed and approved since the board last met on February the 4th. In terms of the administrative update for this evening, just briefly, budget and town meeting preparations are in full swing as they usually are this time of year. I'm in the process of finalizing the last of the contract negotiations. This was a big year with 3 unions and multiple personal service contracts that happened to expire. So that's sort of they're all coming to conclusion, be coming back to the board as appropriate for your ratification on those. Just a coming attraction, the rate review committee recently met and voted to recommend that Tuesday, March 18th at 6 p.m. be the water, sewer, stormwater rate public hearing. Obviously, the committee will come before you with a presentation on that and more discussion, but just a coming attraction on that front. And the initial deadline for the economic development manager position closed on February the 14th. Now it'll stay open until filled, but that's the preference for initial applicants. And we received quite a few, so we're in the process of getting that all together, and hopefully we'll be coming back to the board in the near future with a recommendation on an appointment. I don't know if there's any administrative questions from the board. If not, I'll jump right into the action items that I have this evening. The first is just the overview of draft number 2 of the omnibus budget, which you received as well as the Finance Committee and the public last Friday. That's draft 2 as of today, February 18th. Last Wednesday, myself, the finance manager, and the town accountant met with the Finance Committee on draft 1 of the budget, and so I sort of took them on a deep dive as their request down into the weeds, as they say, on draft 1. The good news is I won't do that for the board tonight for draft 2 unless Selectman Livingston would like me to. Just kidding. Just seeing if you'll just kidding. So I just want to give us a couple of quick highlights. So this is draft 2, which is on the website and in your packet. So as of February 18th, the omnibus budget totals $20,056,000, or a $1,093,000 increase over last year, or a 5.7% increase over last year. So just to put that into perspective, last year the overall budget for FY25 had an increase of 5.5%. What draft 2 has in it that draft 1 didn't is we have both of the school assessments, which I know the board is aware of. So with the school assessments, the budget, the total budget, omnibus and the 2 assessments of the schools, is at $36.3 million, or $1.9 million increase over FY25, or 5.57%. The Ayer Shirley Regional School District has a 6.7% increase on the Ayer assessment, or $960,000. Neshoba Valley Technical High School had a decrease of just about 12%, a decrease of $137,903 due to fewer students attending right now. Draft 2 also includes the fire contract MOA, which was settled. It does not include the DPW or the sergeant's contracts, which will be wrapping up very shortly. And it does not include the non-union COLA recommendation, which the board will be taking action on this evening, as well as the personal service contracts. So those are the last pieces to add. A couple areas that I'd like the board to be aware of and think of is, right now the social worker budget is still in the omnibus budget at a total of $73,236. Myself and the assistant town manager, the police chief, Alicia from Community Development and Katie Petrossi from the Senior Center are actively working on the best proposal and the best mechanism to provide the social services for the town. Keep in mind, this was a new position. Not saying that the position is going away, but there were some challenges, is you learn by doing when something is new. I think the key takeaway for the board is that there will be financial resources and potentially a position. Our commitment to social services in need hasn't gone away. It's just, we're looking at a couple other models. So there hasn't been any change to that. That's still in the budget. The other thing that I flagged before in the budget for the 4th of July is the $10,000 appropriation from the town. The 4th of July revolving account has over $16,000 in it now. We're coming up on March. Our previous friends that did the last 2 years for the 4th of July are not going to do it this year. We thank them for everything that they did, so there's no, nobody has come forward yet on the 4th of July. What I'm proposing for consideration, and it'll be ultimately up to the board, is the question is, do we keep the 10,000 in there knowing that there's over 16,000 for the 4th? Do we take the 10,000 out? Do we leave it in? And that doesn't have to be answered, tonight. I just flagged that on the budget. The last piece is we're going to go through some additional review of the budget and what I call scrubbing, which the goal is, ideally, we would like the omnibus budget not to go over 5% total. It's almost there. So there's a little bit more work to do there. The last thing there's always a surprise, and there were a few this year, but one of the surprises since draft 1, unfortunately, was on the health insurance. I budgeted, as I always do on the high end, a placeholder of 15%, hoping to come in at 10%, which we usually have been lucky on. Unfortunately, this year, and it's not just us, we're coming in at 14.8%. The good news is that's a solid number. The bad news is I'm only 0.2 under my 5%. That's okay. What we've learned from the town's insurer, because we recently changed the health insurance, and if we hadn't changed the health insurance, the Minuteman Neshoba Health Group either A, would not be in existence, or B, easily would have been looking at a 25% increase. There are several factors that I'll touch upon in the budget presentation, the budget meeting on March 12th. There are several factors that drove this number higher than we would have liked. We have reason to believe, if all things stay, that it should fall back to the 10% range for FY27. So again, I think we're in good shape from our end. A little bit more work to do, a few additional costs from the contracts and some further adjustments, but I believe overall that we're in good shape on the budget. And draft 3, which we're intending to be the final draft of the budget, subject of course to any changes that the select board may make, will be ready for March 12th at 6 p.m., which will be the budget presentation here with the select board. The FinCom will go through the final budget. All the departments will be here, and most importantly, we'll answer any questions from the public. So that's sort of a snapshot on draft 2. And the FinCom is going to continue to meet with various departments. They're meeting with the fire department this Thursday, and I continue to go as well as other department heads on the issues of the budget. So I don't know if there's any questions on the budget before we move on. Again, all of this is posted to the FY26 budget page on the website. If people want hard copies, we'd be happy to provide hard copies of any budget materials during normal business hours at Town Hall. Okay.
Might his desire, I have no questions. I'll have them ready for next time.
The next is in accordance with the town's financial policies, spell out the non-union cost of living recommendation for the town's non-union employees, and that includes all the non-union employees, the select board stipends, the board of assessors stipends, the moderator stipend, the tree warden, and the call fire department. All of those positions are governed under the non-union COLA, which, just for the public's benefit, is set by the financial policies, the process. Myself and the benefits manager each year are required to look at certain indexes, which you have in the memo, make a formal recommendation to the select board, who then votes that recommendation, and then that's ultimately subject to town meeting approval. So as you have in your packet, we did the memo from Amanda Lewis, the benefits and payroll manager, who I want to thank for putting it together for FY26. You can see, which is consistent with the last couple years, is that if you go by the various indices here, the cost of living is running higher than the traditional sort of 2%. You can see the CPI from the Boston area has increased by 3.1%, energy prices 5%, food 3.5%. Of course, this is changing constantly. The Bureau of Labor Statistics at 4.2%. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, 2.7%. And then Amanda does a survey, as you can see below, of communities in our size, demographic, and area. And you can still see that the majority, 12 communities, are still at 2% and some on the higher end. Additionally, our union contracts right now, the cost of living has been 2%. The great struggle, of course, is I always believe, for the town to obviously have a cost of living adjustment when it can for its employees. And on the flip side, that said recommendation is also sustainable and can be maintained, in the budget. And ultimately, the taxpayers are paying for that, and some of them are sensitive to, whether on Social Security or other things, are often flat or below 2%, so sensitive to that. So all that being said, I'm, based on the analysis and talking with Amanda, I'm respectfully recommending that the board vote a COLA recommendation, non-union COLA recommendation for FY26 at 2%. The estimated budget impact for that would be $66,982 to the budget. I don't know if there's any questions.
Questions?
No, I think the benchmarking is pretty strong there.
No, I think everything's laid out. So,
I have none, so I'll take a motion.
Then I will make a motion for the FY 2026 cost of living adjustment, or COLA, of 2% for all non-union personnel, call firefighters and compensated elected town officials, effective July 1st, 2025.
seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye.
Okay. Thank you, members of the board. The last, next to the last item, and you have in your packet a memo that I sent to the Finance Committee on the recommendation of the proposed use of free cash. So as the board is aware, that any free cash is subject to appropriation by town meeting, which is further set by the warrant that you approve. On this memo that you can see, I'm pleased to report, as the board is already aware, that we had over $3.2 million in free cash certified this year. That's a true testament to the town, to town meeting, the select board, FinCom. It's a real benchmark to the financial strength of the town, and I think something that the board should be proud of, and the town. And I believe this was the 7th year in a row that we had at least $1 million or more in free cash. This is the highest in the 15 years that I've been here. The main driver for that, if Barbara was here, would explain, there was a lot of interest on a lot of the investment funds of the town to the tune of over $1.3 million. that made up that. It was one of the main factors, but at any time, if the board would like future meeting, we can get into the details of it. So what you have, and this was presented to the Finance Committee last week, we had some general discussion, and overall, the FinCom was supportive of this recommendation. The 3.2 million, we're proposing 10,000 of that go into the compensated balances account. That's the account that we can use to fund separation from service from the town without having to hit town budgets and so forth. The current balance in that account is 73,000. It should be about 80,000 as the balance would like to keep it at. So a small amount being recommended to be put in there. This would be subject, again, to board approval in the article. The pension forward funding, which we've been doing, the 300,000, is consistent with past practice, and we realize savings on that. Granted, as I mentioned from the draft one budget, we had a spike in our pension assessment, a little higher than we would like. However, when doing the analysis, if we hadn't done the forward funding, it would have been much, much higher. So that has served the town well at a cost savings. The post-employment benefits, the free cash portion, per the financial policies, we've been putting a total of 300,000 in each year. The meals tax, the locals meals tax is going to be 175,000, and historically we've put the balance from free cash to get to the 300,000. So that is a recommendation again. The UDAG account under the select board, the UDAG grant is just about fully replenished. You recently authorized $65,000 for the DPW project. We're recommending, per your motion, we replenish that, and with that vote by town meeting, there'll be over 3.2 million in the UDAG. And then the lion's share comes down to the two stabilization accounts, recommending $761,808. There's no magic to that number, except that was the balance after the capital. To go into stabilization, you'll see the market value of stabilization as of December 31st is almost 6 million in stabilization, which exceeds the Department of Revenue benchmark. And as the board knows, but for the public's benefit, both stabilization and capital stabilization can only be accessed by a 2/3 vote of a town meeting. And then the lion's share into capital stabilization, recommending 2 million. The market value of that account as of December 31st was 4.3, over 4.3 million, and that would bring it up to over 6.3. So if you add all of those, obviously, as you can see, would be the recommendation for the free cash for town meeting. So again, not looking for any vote tonight from the select board. Again, these numbers within reason can be moved around, but that was just sort of our starting point based on sort of past practice with the free cash. We don't need any free cash to balance the budget, which is always good, and that would be our recommendation, and this is further investment in the town at a savings ultimately to the taxpayer. So I don't know if there's any questions. The FinCom was supportive. I mentioned I'd be coming to the select board with this, and if there's any questions.
Any questions?
I have no questions, but that looks like one of the highest free cash we've had in a while.
It's the highest since I've been here.
Yeah,
I've
that's
been
what I
here
thought,
for-
yeah.
That's
So-
3.2.
Which is good,
Yep.
you know?
That's great.
A lot of towns
Don't have
don't
any.
have.
Yeah.
They're lucky if they get $100,000
Yeah.
or something, so, but this is great, so. Good work, everybody.
It's a town effort, as they say, and over the years, so.
It's a village.
Yep. So again, if there's any questions, we'll be bringing this back up when you go to, approve the warrant and the budget, but please let, Barbara or I know. The last item for the board, and I've just put a memo, is just an update on the development of the town meeting warrant. The town meeting is going to be on April 28th, and I realized after tonight there's 4 more select board meetings, and then before town meeting, before you know it, it'll be spring. You won't know that from outside. So
My driveway will finally defrost.
Right. So I just put together a snapshot of what the warrant is looking like as of now in terms of articles and article topics. The deadline, absolute deadline, is March 28th at noon for any warrant articles, also the deadline for citizens petitions. As you can see, it's a lot, most of the articles are standard for the annual town meeting. There'll be 3 articles, 2, 3, and 4 are the 3 union contract articles, which are unique to this year. You'll see under the enterprise funds, the addition of Article 12, the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. Article 13 and 14 will be all of the capital, the borrow and the transfer. You'll see a couple, the firefighters matching grant funds and the aquatic weed control amounts to be determined for this year. The revolving funds Article 17 is each year to authorize those limits. And under community, so it's pretty much standard. Under the CPC, we're anticipating on Article 27, there is a project application going through CPC right now for the replacement of the Ayer Library roof. That did go to Capital, and then it was suggested at Capital it also go through CPC. And then there are, you'll see there are 5, and most of them are housekeeping, 5 zoning bylaw amendments. I know it looks like a lot. The town planner will be coming before you on March 4th to just give a brief overview and answer any questions that the board may have, and then the planning board will do its process. But so, for example, Article 28 is required updates to the town's floodplain overlay district. This happens periodically. The one right after it is the definitions for the floodplain overlay district changes. Accessory dwelling units, Article 30. The state just passed state law about the ability to have accessory dwelling units, and the town planner, the building department, and others have been working on that bylaw. Update the table of use to incorporate the accessory dwelling units, Article 31. And then Article 32 is a zoning bylaw amendment to amend the zoning map. This is for the parcel of land for the senior center. In other words, it just needs to be broken out on the map. So the planner will give a brief presentation on the 4th. Nothing in depth like when you hear zoning article, pretty straightforward. And then lastly, Article 33, the Library Board of Trustees, and this is under development, and I was at their meeting last week, would like to submit a home rule petition to the state to amend the Ayer Library Act of Incorporation. So the library is formed through the legislative act. And one of the things that needs to be amended is it says that they can only raise up to $230,000. Of course, that's $230,000 in 1880 numbers, which somebody did the math, which is like equivalent of $6 million now. So they want to get rid of that cap, which makes sense, but it requires a home rule petition. They want to get rid of the appointed library board of directors. In other words, there's some elected and some appointed. They want them to all be elected. So housekeeping things. The library director will be coming before you to give a brief overview on what they're proposing. And secondly, I've asked him and the library board to also schedule a public information session on that so everybody's on the same page. So right now it stands at 33 articles, which is about average. Average is about 35, subject to, at this point, I think, if there's any citizens petitions at this point. So very shortly we'll have a draft of the actual warrant for you. A little early in the process for that, but I wanted to give you, as I do each year, a snapshot of coming attractions. And the last piece will be talking to the moderator and the town clerk, as the board is aware, and I think this works well as we get closer, is using the consent agenda to move some of the standard housekeeping articles so we can focus more time and discussion on the substantive matters. I think that mechanism has worked well.
Yeah.
So with that concludes my report. Unless there's any questions from the board, I thank you for your time as always.
Right, next up is gonna be new business and select board member questions. I did ask, so I'm on that committee for, increasing housing units on Devon's. As part of that was put on a subcommittee, that was tasked with discussing with Shirley and Harvard, and Mass Development, opportunities as well as concerns. The plan is for the governor to add, I believe it's 420 additional units. They've already removed the cap. So we discussed like some of the land, where it is, but the governor has said she wants these units there, and they're not paying any attention to possible disposition of like future borders. It is that these, so they just want to know from the subcommittee, what are some of the concerns about additional units? Like Harvard, for example, brought up that because they have the contract with Mass Development for educating kids that live on Devons, that if it was 420 additional families, could they possibly absorb all that for schools? So those are the kind of things they were looking for.
So that was actually brought up by Harvard at a Devon's Jurisdiction Framework Committee meeting, and a member in the audience said, "We've looked at your budget, and Harvard can afford it, can absorb the students."
They can
Yeah.
afford it. It's the school, the elementary school can't. They don't feel it could take in that many more students. But that doesn't mean that Ayer couldn't also.
Right, and I think they're, it depends on like, where is everybody located too. I mean, if the drive is easier to get to Ayer School, then, the parent might want to go, I'm going to Ayer, especially since there's no direct route to Harvard. But I'm a little concerned that the governor, not surprised, isn't paying attention. And here's the bigger problem, and I've said this so many times. If you're going to make a change to paragraph 2, you got to see how it affects paragraph 6, and nobody does that. And I know some people are like, why is she talking about paragraphs? My point being is that we look at one thing, and we're not looking at a ripple effect as to how it affects this. So I'm glad that the subcommittee is looking at this. But my question is, are tiny homes being considered even for affordable housing? Because not everybody's going to have a child.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just wondering if maybe that's something that should maybe be thought about.
And I think there's a different subcommittee that is discussing the types of housing.
Because that makes a big difference. You say 420 units, that's a very broad term,
Yeah. And that doesn't include the apartment building that's already approved over in Everson Green. So this would be on top of that.
Over by Shirley.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But the problem too, as far as, like jurisdiction, and that goes right back to the Vicksburg Square. And I, in attempting to make a point in the Devon's Jurisdictional Framework Committee, brought that up and said, that's something that should be kind of talked about now. And, so that if, and I was very clear, I was a little surprised at the pushback, but I was very clear, is that if it goes back to the historical lines, that part of the decisions are already done. So I think that that's something that, kind of needs to be negotiated, because honestly, and I've said this numerous times, if the historical lines go back to the towns, it ain't going to be a matchy match necessarily.
Right.
Because you might have to move a line to, hey, it works better if you stay in, this part stays in Harvard, this one goes to Ayer, that goes to Shirley. So it's not necessarily going to be an exact match.
Well, and that was one of the things that the Harvard select person brought up, was that this plan totally does not pay any attention to that. And so you could end up with a house that goes through, Harvard and Ayer.
Right.
So where does that person pay
Right.
taxes to?
Right.
So, but that's not one of the governor's concerns. It's, let's get the houses there, and then.
Wouldn't want her to be concerned about anything that might affect the future of the people. I mean, Wouldn't want that.
Did you have, I know you were gonna pull.
Yeah, so, couple, Mr. Chair, a couple of quick questions and suggestions. So one is, I can ask all of the, when is your next meeting? When,
I'm supposed to submit any suggestions or things tonight to, for tomorrow.
okay.
And then the subcommittee, we're meeting again on Monday.
Okay, so a couple things. One is, I can ask, obviously won't have it for tomorrow, but ask all relevant town departments just to weigh in on, as you're asking, from their perspective, what do they see as just potential opportunities or challenges to housing? So at least you have that
Yep.
list from the departments. I think, as you and Selectman Livingston have already mentioned, it does, the issue of jurisdiction can't be ignored. You know what I'm saying? And I understand there's a housing crisis and so forth, but there's been a lot of discussion in the framework about jurisdiction, versus the housing and that issue. The other piece is, how many units did you say?
420?
420? And did they give any, I know you just had the first meeting in the subcommittee, I'm just curious, was there any sense of a timeline from the state?
On when?
Yeah.
Well, this whole report is due in May, so it's kind of a accelerated timeline, but that's just for the report. In terms of there's still no developer identified. They just want to make the report to the governor.
And does the 400 and, did you say 435?
I think 420.
Last 425. Is that independent of the Vicksburg Square property, or is that inclusive conceptually?
Conceptually, it includes Vicksburg Square, but again, it could turn out that a developer goes in and decides that it's not financially feasible to renovate or any of the buildings, or tearing it down and cleaning the land. So it is on the table, but again, there's no further discussion. It's on the table, but there's no plan.
So lastly, I think from my perspective, for the board, I'll ask all of the departments just to give some initial thoughts and I'll get that to you so you have that for the subcommittee. Sure. The second thing is, I would again, from my perspective, stress the concerns with the jurisdiction versus the housing. And the other theme is, if you got 435 units that don't address Vicksburg Square, so we're left with Vicksburg Square, which we know the majority of it is in Ayer, and then do 435 units elsewhere, that raises concern. I think the issue is, what does this do to define the character and nature of the towns out here? Now, there can be opportunities too. You could argue there's more of a consumer base and so forth, assuming that Devon's doesn't continue to develop, retail and so forth. So there's a lot, I think, to consider, which Boston often does not out here. So I appreciate the update, and I think it's a great balance as to what that means out here. But I would be concerned, because Vicksburg Square, based on what we do know, is obviously not a cheap or easy fix, and that's based on what we know, let alone what we don't know, right? And so most likely the low-hanging fruit would be the other 85 acres of undevelopable land up there to put the units, but then we're left, something's got to happen with Vicksburg Square. So just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, just one of the things I think of, you add that many people, just traffic, the basic, driving through West Main at McPherson, it's a terrible intersection. So if you're going to add that amount of volume of traffic, I mean, there's not a lot of ways, besides if you go down Barnum to the Rotary, has that even been considered? I'm just, because I think you bring this up, just what it does to air, right?
Yeah,
What it does to, so I'm just trying to think, even just short term, that kind of thing, how it impacts our town, adding that amount of people. That was one of the things, there's a bunch of kind of other things that I'd have to kind of think through a little bit, but, um, you know, those kind of immediate things. Now, where there's, you know, possible problems, then there's always opportunities. So a lot of times, almost always, they go hand in hand. So if you speak about, you know, this could be great for business,
Yes.
and that great, you know, air business is great, but then can we, uh, I guess, support that, you know, with our business? So we have like Shop and Save right here. Does that become the place where everyone goes? Throwing that out as just a thought. So our resources here, um, you know, can we handle that amount of people that if they all kind of come this way? Because yeah, there is no easy way to get to Harvard. So if people live and they're just kind of coming out, they're coming this way. So both plus and minus, you know, that kind of thing. Um, you know, I guess that's my kind of first initial thoughts outside of, you know, the jurisdiction, and I think that's the big one.
Yeah.
How we figure that out. And also, I mean, I know that Harvard has the contract with the schools. However, you know, people would have the ability, right, if they want a school choice. I mean, they
Okay.
don't have to go. So if you get a number of people because they say the middle school is so easy to get to from Devon's, we don't want to go to Bromfield. We want to go right here. Um, you know, so does that come? I don't know.
And I guess currently Harvard stopped taking school choice for elementary kids to choice into Harvard because of how full their school is.
Okay.
Chris brings up good points. As far as the traffic, I, I kind of wonder, like, how did we handle the traffic when the base was, active? You know, I mean, it was busy. But Harvard, regardless of how jurisdiction ends up, there's no school out there in Devens. So even if Devens was to become their own town, they would still have to be going to Harvard or Ayer. Harvard has got to create a road.
Yeah, and there was a
You
little
know?
bit of discussion
We're going to put a
about
toll
them.
booth.
There's possibility of building a school on Devon's, but that was.
But even that is going to take time, because before you put a school on Devens, you've got to figure out, first of all, um, who's going to manage it? What's the jurisdiction? Because you can't necessarily have mass development do it.
Right.
There are some things that you're going to have to start limiting, but you're still going to need, a better access road, and that should be, Harvard really should be starting to think about that because even, well, we don't have a hospital, so we don't have to worry about emergency services, because governor doesn't want to pay attention to that either. But it just, I just getting a little tired, I guess, of, we sit here and we're like, okay, you got this, and then if the answer is yes, you're going to go over here. If the answer is no, you're going to go over here, whatever. And yet we can't get the higher ups to do that, and that's just infuriating. Maybe we should invite her here.
Good idea. Good idea.
Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
one last thing, promise. Conceptually, perhaps one of the things you could mention is where they're doing this study, which they're going to call it, which I understand is over just a period of a few months, is by no means a comprehensive study. But the concept of they really need to look at, as brought up by others, they really need to look at the impacts to the towns and to the region. It's very easy to do the analysis on Devens and say, oh, traffic is manageable, et cetera, et cetera. But there really needs to be a component of the, maybe not in this study, but as a future recommendation of an analysis to these impacts. Because basically, if all of those units are built, it over doubles the existing residential population of
Yeah, because was it
Devens.
240 or 250?
Yeah, it's like two, yeah.
What, I think they have 500
Yeah.
residents on
Yeah.
Devens, so
Yeah.
they might get 1,000.
Because what often happens is they do the analysis of Devon's, but not looking at the whole, these impacts.
Well, you look at too, I mean, like our senior center.
Yes.
There's no senior center on Devon's, right?
Right.
I mean, so you're gonna have people, seniors that wanna live in Devon's, great. But do they have the resources like Ayer has, where, you know, you have a senior center? No. Well, where do they go? You know, do they come here? Do they go to Harvard? You know, I know parks very well, same kind of thing. You have some kids and they want to play some sports, great. Do they have leagues there? No. So where are they going to go? So it's adding
They have great fields.
yeah, great fields. I'm sure we could work out something if we can use those fields. But you know, the more I just kind of keep on thinking about it, it's like, great, add these things, but you don't have the resources that a town like Ayer has. Do you just tell them too bad? Yeah, your kids can't play sports
Right.
because we just, you know, no, they're going to go somewhere else. So.
The other part is we've already kind of heard that an elementary school could cost $60 million.
Oh, yeah.
So if, it ends up, we're building one here, well then Devon's might go, well, we can just send them to Ayer,
Mhm.
which was brought up that night, as we have to kind of take that into account. But I mean, where's all this money coming from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and apparently the Devon's Mass Development pays a lot of money for their kids to go to Harvard. The
They
state pays
do
better
have money
than-
out there, but
Yep.
I mean, it's getting to a point. I'm all for housing because we all know, but it's they're acting like the housing's going to appear like, okay, your committee ends in with the report in May, and by September they're breaking ground.
400 houses.
That's the way they kind of act, and they're like, oh, we're going to do this housing, and it's like, you got to get your architecture, you got to check the soil, you got to do all that other stuff. It's a couple of years. And then even once you break down, it's a couple years, So, I mean, honestly, their messaging is just, you're still going to be a few years. So your housing crisis is not going to be over for a few more years.
And we didn't even bring up the hospital.
Don't be
I know, sorry, I tried to get you riled up.
Yes, Pauline?
Good evening. I am down in my basement, so if it sounds weird, I apologize. I'm doing laundry while watching you. I'm hearing, Janice, please forgive me for this, but I'm hearing my dear friend Frank Maxent in my head that Devon's is not to compete with Ayer and its businesses. Devon's, Robert, you might help me with this. Devon's decided to contract with Harvard, so children who live on Devon's must go to Harvard. I don't believe they have the option for school choice, but I could be wrong. It's been a long time. But the last thought, I like all of your comments, everyone. The one thing I really want you to keep in the back of your head, and I think you are, but it needs to be said, Governor Healy may not win re-election. And everything will change as it has every time someone new. Everything will change at Devon's every time someone new has been elected. And I'm pretty sure the town of Ayer won't vote to re-elect her. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you.
Just to bounce off, that's a great point. So I think that whatever is going to happen needs to be written in such a way so that whoever ends up in that seat can look at it and go, okay, I get it. Maybe we might tweak it down 20 units, but let's move forward. If it can be shown that there is support for this, for the affordable housing in this region and everything in a sustainable way, that, no good building all these homes if no one could afford them. Irony. But that whoever's in that chair will accept it.
Right. Good point. All right. Well, thank you. I have some things to give them tomorrow, and then
And I'll get you some more.
that's it from me, Janice.
So I just wanted to let you all know, the other day I emailed Senator Eldridge and Representative and invited them to attend a board meeting. I gave them both the March dates. They're busy, which I did in my reply go, really? Would have thought that 6 weeks' notice I would have been able to do
Right.
something. But as it stands right now, they are willing to appear on April 1st, which of course we would
For
have.
real? It's April
Well, I
1st,
know,
right?
right? I know, I did think to myself that, but, you know, that just happens to be the first meeting, and of course, you know, we would put them at the beginning. And I told them that things we would want an update on, but are not limited to, the hospital, UMass, possibly taking over the hospital, and when is the, emergency services getting their money?
Mhm.
So, they were kind of put on notice of, you know, hey, we haven't forgotten,
Yeah.
you know, so, but anyway, so that's the way it stands right now, is April 1st, they will both be with us.
Yes, thank you.
I would,
Looking forward to it.
I would be open to, can we move our meeting to accommodate them in March? To get them here even sooner.
Well, I did tell them that, you know, hey, if something works out, you can get to us sooner. I didn't really leave them any other options as far as, you know, but if I see them going out to dinner
Yeah.
when they could have been here,
Yes.
I'm not gonna be happy, and I'll tell them.
Yeah. All
Very
right.
good.
All right. Next up is the approval of minute meetings from February 4th. I didn't have any changes or edits.
I didn't see anything.
I didn't see anything.
So with that, I'll make a motion that the meeting minutes from February 4th be approved as submitted.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. And then
Mr.
next up.
Chair,
Yes.
I make a motion that the select board move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30 Alpha, Section 21 Alpha, Exemption Number 2, Non-Union Personnel, ratification of town accountant personal services contract, and that we do not reconvene into open session, but adjourn from executive session.
Seconded?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair says aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.